Thank you to the Decoding Nature sponsors: Five Rivers Metro Parks Foundation, Cox Arboretum Foundation, Wagner Subaru, and Wegersen Gardens Foundation.
We're accompanied by millions of the 17-year cicada here at Allwood Garden Metro Park. I meet with Doug Horvath to learn about the property we're on and the godmother of the environmental movement in Southwest Ohio, Marie Ahl.
Well, Jason, it all goes back to John Ahl. He lived in Dayton, but he used to drive out north here, and Little York's a little hamlet here, and he'd come up this little road, and he fell in love with this property. It was a 150-acre farm. So he bought it. John ends up selling 50 acres of his property to Conservancy District so that they can work on the dam here. And he used to come up here a lot and observe. He was kind of known as the night watchman by some of the workers because he wanted to see what was happening.
Yeah, he wanted to be involved.
So they finished the dam 1921 December here in Englewood. He goes on vacation next June and meets Marie Ahl. Marie.
Right.
And then they get married the following year.
The way you knew Marie Ahl, you were an intern here.
Yes, I started an internship in 1987 and knew Paul Knoop. And Paul had worked with Marie for years. And he introduced me. And I had this project at the time. I became full-time here, worked here 11 years, but early on I wanted to interview her and get some stories. She wasn't as mobile at that point in her life. She wondered if we still had all the kids coming up to the programs that we did when she was more active and could see it.
Right.
So we also started on our tours with the classes. I would sometimes bring them down here and we would knock on her window. We'd wave to her and she would just light up.
What else do I need to know about Marie Ahl?
Well, Marie went through some big changes. You know, her husband died, John died in 1955. So she's living here. What is she gonna do?
Right.
She thinks about giving the property to the Audubon Society. John Baker comes from the National Audubon Society, and he convinces her not to wait till she dies to pass on the land, but to do it now. And the land wasn't prestige enough, or it wasn't significant species. It was a farm up here.
Right.
She did have beautiful gardens here.
Right.
But it wasn't like an Audubon nature sanctuary.
Right.
But what they needed was education facilities. And so she starts the first nature center in the Midwest. Right here, it opens up in 1957. And Marie was part of it. She got to live and watch it develop and work with the directors and made sure it stayed on mission and built a board. Later on, that property, you know, becomes Allwood Audubon. She's still living here on these 30. They'd already sold 50 to the Conservancy District. She ends up deeding this part of the property over to the Five Rivers Metro Parks. And she deeds it over, but she lives here through the remainder of her life. She passed on in 2002.
Okay.
And it's just a nice legacy. And she was so well connected with the Garden Clubs of America, the Dayton chapter here. And she was a visionary, a strong woman. She knew other strong women like Jean Woodall.
Okay.
And very well connected with all of them.
Nice.
Women like Marie Ahl and Jean Woodall were influential in Dayton's garden club scene. I'm meeting with Charlie Shoemaker, former executive director of the Metro Parks, to learn about how these garden clubs were instrumental in getting the Park District established.
Well, I could put it very bluntly, they were doers. Most of the garden clubs, and specifically the Garden Club of Dayton, was comprised of wives of CEOs. So you had names like Woodall, Ahl, Siebenthaler, Mead. So they had influence. They were very influential, and they were used to winning. The story is that in 1959, there was a transportation study done of Greene and Montgomery County. As a result of that study, what came out of it was that we were rapidly losing open space in the region. And that led to a gentleman named Glenn Thompson, avid outdoorsman. He had come from Cincinnati, where he was with the Enquirer, and he was very familiar with the Hamilton County Park District. So this is where the garden clubs come in. And by the way, his wife was a member of the Garden Club of Dayton.
Of course.
All right.
Right.
So he knew his audience. Let's say that.
Right.
So he had a meeting with the Garden Club of Dayton. He laid out this issue. We're losing open space. If we don't do something, we're not going to have enough to meet our needs. And he created this sense of urgency. But at the end of his presentation, he looked at the members of the audience, these wives of CEOs, these influential people, and said, but I know I'm wasting my time. You're more interested in your children and your gardens than this issue. And Gene Woodhull grabbed him by the collar, probably, and said, what do you want us to do? And he said, form a committee. And so on April 8, 1963, they created the Montgomery County Park District.
Let's go find out what happened once the parks were established. Carrie Scarf from Five Rivers Metro Parks is going to give us the play-by-play.
So it's 1963.
Right.
And the Park District is official. Mm-hmm. Who and what happened next?
In 1964, they hired the first executive director, Richard Lawwell. He just gets going.
He's hitting it, hits the ground running.
Right. In 1965, boom, Carriage Hill.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1966, Possum Creek, Sugar Creek. 1967, the parks at the dams. Boom, boom, boom. I talked about Richard Lawwell gets hired.
Right.
And he's a landscape architect, so he has a planning mindset.
Yeah.
And he looks around a county map like this and says, where do people live? Where do people need access to open space? And he plotted this map out before it ever really existed.
Okay.
So, as we said, started with Carriage Hill,
Right.
up here in the northeast.
Right.
I bet he always had those parks behind the dams with the Miami Conservancy District in mind. So that's these: Englewood, Taylorsville, Huffman, and Germantown.
Okay.
So he went out and got Sugar Creek and Possum Creek, right?
Yeah.
So he's pretty well covered. Now, the west part of the county is very rural, so he wasn't as concerned over there. So that's the way it was for a long time. And then in 1972, boom, Cox Arboretum. So these were the first 8. These are the Elite 8.
The Elite 8.
The Elite 8.
Like basketball.
Exactly.
Before heading out, I want to learn more about Carriage Hill, the first Metro Park, and what makes it special.
There are big things to do here, and more than one. So over here we have Cedar Lake, great place to fish, picnic shelters, you can bring the family. And then right behind that is all this hiking with woods and really large prairies, so the birding is fantastic.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then here, we're at the farm. You've got all the animals, you've got the house and the kitchen, and it's the way it was done in the 1880s is what we're doing. So you can learn about all that stuff. You can learn how kids played. And then, on further back, is the riding center.
How does all this remain sustainable?
Yeah.
How does this thrive?
Well, number one is the voters in Montgomery County vote on our property tax levy every 10 years. And they've been very, very supportive. And then number two is there are 3 commissioners that are appointed by the probate judge. And those commissioners over the years have just provided us with fantastic support.
Curious to learn more about park commissioners, I meet up with Karen Davis, who shares her role and some history about the 3 founding commissioners.
Our role is really to protect natural areas, whether they be river corridors or parks, and to promote conservation so that we can continue to create an ongoing benefit to the people in the community that we serve in our region.
Do you have any oversight on the cicadas?
No, I was hoping I could, and somehow those powers
Somehow it didn't work.
Those powers have, left me.
So being a park commissioner for over 20 years, what do you know about the first commissioners?
So the first, let me just preface my statement with saying I consider the first three commissioners three of the greats. William Patterson became a park commissioner back in 1963, and he was a community activist and someone who was very much engaged in open space in the community. He truly believed so much in what he did that when he was asked to be the president of the commission, he accepted that position. They had their first meeting on June 18th in 1963, and that kind of launched and spawned many great things. The second one I can talk about is Charles Bridge. Before the Park District ever started, he launched a petition. He was really good about creating a groundswell of support in the community, which is something that we continue to do even today. So he literally started this petition and got 17 cities and townships to join in on agreeing to start a park district. He understood that community mattered and you really needed to get some input and insight from the community. And then the last one is Harry Price, who I did have the pleasure and honor of being able to meet. It was at a board tour back in the early 90s. And he was a very unique individual, very staunch businessman, owned Price Brothers downtown.
Oh, okay.
Same family. He was an avid outdoorsman and another one that clearly believed in this whole notion of open space and green space. And he, just to give you a sense of his contribution, he looked at a gravel pit in East Dayton, and that ended up turning into Eastwood Lake Park for the city of Dayton, which is now managed by us through a collaborative agreement with the city of Dayton. Those three are kind of the bedrock and the cornerstone from which we have continued to build the foundation and grow from today. So they are an amazing group of people, along with many others that followed them.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Here we are today enjoying all of these parks, protected by the pioneers who knew we needed to preserve our region's open space. On the next episode of Decoding Nature, we dive into the various habitats and ecosystems within our metro parks. Until next time, stay outside and explore your Five Rivers Metro Parks.